Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My camera is not straight. There we go. And I welcome all of you back to another Rage video where our Summer of Rush continues. And I had a little bit of a think last night, ladies and gentlemen, when I was contemplating Dreamline, because I'll level with you, ladies and gentlemen, I kind of listened to Dreamline again as soon as I went off the air. And I couldn't help but feel as if, like, it's kind of a bit like one of those slightly more simple... Dreamline is like one of those songs where it's like a slightly more simplified version of something from Dream Theater or Tangerine Dream. Like, you know how sometimes you would get like a really long instrumental. You get something like maybe 10 minutes of no voices, but it's just music. You know, that's the sort of thing we love that sort of stuff around here. We like things that just kind of play music, and sometimes you can like it's like one of those books where you can put in your own stories and you can decide what goes where. The only thing we give you is sort of like an ambience sort of theme to it, and then you go from place to place. Dreamline seem to be like one of those things where they've done sort of two things at the same time. They've given you an ambient sort of background. It's sort of melancholy. It's very rich. It's sort of like... It's one of those things where you begin to realize that you could listen to it when you're on the road. You can listen to it at night. There's never really a bad time to listen to songs like Dreamline. It's a bit like risotto. There is never a bad time to ever have risotto. It's like rice, but it's like better things with it. Stuff like Tangerine Dream or Rotomania, it's like lobster risotto with you get a little bit of, maybe you get a bit of krill, you maybe get a bit of shellfish, maybe you get a bit of I had this beautiful risotto about a year ago. It was one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. It was just the right balance of fish. There was just like a lovely little... It's like scented. It's like they put a cheese sauce into it because it had a very rich sort of smell. And they had this lobster tail and it was poached absolutely to perfection. Why don't I have my own show? Why don't I get a spot on BBC television? Why don't we get... a show as opposed to Late Night with what's his face, Eric Clapton? No, not Eric Clapton. It was I can't remember what it was, but Jules Holland. Why don't I get a spot on BBC television with Jules Holland? Because we could both reminisce about 1970s prog rock movements, and I can also reminisce about food, because I don't know whether it's just because I'm hungry or whether or not it's just the first thing that comes to mind, but I think I think many people around the world, especially those in native Canada or British Columbia, will be able to justify to that. And to anyone in Canada right now who doesn't like Rush is a traitor to their nation and the entire North American continent. And they are morally wrong. You know who you are. And I know who I am, because it is now time to get on our high horse and to administer some active bravado. So, I hope you guys are ready for this. I cannot wait as well. So, let's begin. Bravado. In 3, 2, 1, and...
sun. If the moment of glory is over before it's begun, if the dream is won, though everything is lost, we will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. When the dust has cleared, victory denied, a summit too lofty, river a little too wide. If we keep our pride, though paradise is lost, we will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. But we will not count the cost. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. And if love remains, though everything is lost, we will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. And if love remains, though everything is lost, we will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. And if love remains,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was Bravado by Rush. It's a very melancholy... that's become word of the day, really, hasn't it? It's one of those tales where don't immediately start hyping yourself up. Because, okay, without even thinking about it, let me give you my definition of bravado. In the idea that you give yourself a round of applause because you think you've done something impressive. Sometimes it can be, but maybe it's not quite as impressive as you initially thought it was. So it's not necessarily the same thing as giving yourself like an ego trip, but it's sort of like a step towards inflating your ego for thinking you should be accomplished or validated for something you've done. A bit like me, for example. But I love of course, the story of Icarus, you might argue is the most iconic sort of example they could have used to describe someone with a very active bravado. And also how very, very quickly things turned sour and Icarus fell back down to earth. Now, what I think is really, I suppose what's kind of like cool about the premise is that it's not so much telling you that you can't necessarily feel bad for yourself, feel good for doing something impressive, but the point is that don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think that all of a sudden, just because you've killed 50 people in a single game of Fortnite, that all of a sudden you're on Dr. Disrespect level, and you start flapping your chops online about how great you are. Maybe this song describes DSP, Darkside Phil, almost to a T. DSP thought he was hot shit because he played a glitchier import version of Street Fighter 2 Turbo in a tournament. He thought he was, because he came 4th place in a tournament which featured a substantial lack of former pro Street Fighter Turbo players. And then it got so badly to his hate, and DSP had a tendency to lash out and scream vitriol all over the place whenever he lost a match. And he's basically made a living by just acting like hot shit, and somehow thinks that everything, everyone's going to bow to him, and he gets really upset because people aren't going to fall for that kind of bullshit. I say bullshit because I don't necessarily think Rush want to say words like bullshit, but I'm thinking more on the lines of, what's this? When the dust has cleared and victory denied, because DSP, he only came 4th place, and when all is said and done, what exactly has been accomplished? He didn't even come in 1st place, so he was the 3rd of the losers, you might say, but it gave a clearer image about exactly what was being established. That DSP thought he was somehow better than everyone, despite the fact that he didn't win, and he was using an inferior copy of the game. And then it went on to... Because, listen, there are dozens of examples of people who are like this. But I think the reason why I point out DSP almost for the sake of this video in particular, is that it didn't just happen during Icarus. Not everybody understands exactly why you don't, try and grab the sun, or even why it's a good idea to start, bragging. Because when people put it to the test, you end up looking like a complete idiot because all of a sudden you've been caught out, and as it turns out, you're not as good as you think you are. Maybe that should be like a tagline for this song, is "You're not as good as you think you are." Because when the dust is settled, I love the line of, "We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost." Meaning almost, it's as it says is that, okay, we will repay our debt to society, but the damage it does to our reputation can prove to be far greater. My dad often would say stuff like, think of the money, think about how much these people get paid, think about exactly how much they're earning. I wouldn't mind being in their position just so I could earn stuff like from that. I hear my dad say that sort of thing about a lot of people nowadays, but I think that some of the people he's talked about, I don't disagree that, people have to earn money just to afford a living, to keep doing the things that they do. The thing I'm objecting to is the damage it does to a person's reputation. People point, I don't really want to say him as a definite example, but James Corden, for example, is an example that sort of comes to mind. That he was, I loved what his material in Gavin and Stacey, because he was one of the writers, and I thought he just seemed, really he seemed like the sort of person you could get along with. He seemed not too far out of the ordinary. He was just relaxed and he did all that, and then he went to America and he got on this gravy train where I don't want to say he sold out, but rather he worked to a very specific sort of demographic. And listen, I don't blame James Corden for doing that, because at the end of the day, that's his decision. And it's not as if he's developed a bravado or an ego or anything like that. He just bees himself and he gets on with it. And some people just don't really like that because they think he's a bit of a sellout. They think he sucks up to some people, kisses their ass and that sort of thing. It's not now. Listen, I'm not saying I don't sometimes kiss ass. There are only certain occasions. Like, if somebody, did a favor for me, then I gotta do, the favor in return. I don't really consider that kissing ass. I just feel as if, like, repaying a favor or an obligation, because that seems, fair enough. You could easily say. The thing I object to, which is probably why, unless, of course, if I was going to America to do a show, like present a show, like I mentioned earlier, why don't I have my own show? If I did that, I would just be exactly as I was now, and some people like that, some people don't. I just think people will listen to you if you've got something to say, and it's about you. If we keep our pride through Paradise is Lost, we at the very least, we may have screwed ourselves over, but at the very least, we've not devolved from humanity. We are still the same people. We make bad decisions. Who doesn't? Sometimes really poor decisions can have really costly repercussions. But for the most part, unless somebody's like really gone out of their way to, not consider what they are to do, or if they're not thinking straight, then certain things like cloud people's judgment. I mean, I could mention, Christian Western Chandler pepper spraying a GameStop employee because he felt as if, like, he was worth paying attention to despite all the horrible things he's done. He still flaunted around believing that, he was hot shit because he was a fanboy of Sega and Nintendo. There's plenty of things like that. And again, I could rattle them off, but I think the examples I've given are fair enough. Between somebody who flaps their jaw so much that all of a sudden they immediately demand, people feel bad for them just because they are they are a specific sort of person. We've also had somebody who is, I'd say, has a bit, well, from my opinion about, Corden, I think he's all right. It's just not for me, and I bet I don't even know the guy in real life, so he could be a great man, he could be like Alan Shearer, like an absolute dick to be around, or I could be like Christian Western Chandler, which is someone who has got his ego so far up his own arse that I'm actually genuinely surprised that he didn't find the second medallion up there. But that's the thing, is that this could happen to anyone at any place. And sometimes it happens without our knowledge or without us realizing it. And if the music stops, there's only the sound of the rain, or the hope and glory, or the sacrifice in vain. Meaning, maybe you were doing this for less than noble causes. Maybe that's the whole point right there, is doing something for less than noble causes. Because when you think about it, when Icarus went to fly off to catch the sun, was he doing it to, bring it back down to the mortals, to take away from the gods, or was he doing it just to show people that he could? Questions, ladies and gentlemen, and it's this sort of thing that you gotta keep one eye out for. What is it? Do people do things for the right reasons? Do people do wrong things for the right reasons? Or do people do right things for the wrong reasons? Or do people do wrong things for the wrong reasons? You tell me, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this reaction video to Bravado. Please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys thought of Bravado for yourselves. And I will hope to see you guys again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye for now.